In the beginning, God created the entire universe. It began as nothing but chaos. No light, no planets, nothing. Even less meaningful than a pile of Legos.
Stories in the Bible tell us about creation, about the people whom God created, and how God needed to keep setting those people on the right path.
Like a maze, the history described in the Old Testament is filled with wrong turns.
God was especially fond of the humans and gave them a special place to live. The humans were expected to live in friendship with each other and respect for God, but they didn't.
God kicked them out of the garden, and that began a long history of people making poor choices over and over, followed by God showing them mercy over and over.
The world became filled with people who forgot about God's love, wanting to have power over each other. They wanted to become big deals, competing with each other instead of sharing God's goodness. They even began worshiping idols instead of God.
Listen to Noah. He thinks he's better than anyone else.
What's his goodness done for him?
God decided to destroy the entire earth except for that one family who remembered God.
Every kind of animal and bird went into the boat.
God, in his mercy, gave a promise to Noah and his family after the flood. God would never again destroy the earth.
The earth soon again became populated by humans. One in particular, Abraham, was a faithful believer and was the forefather of God's chosen, the Israelites. God promised that Abraham's descendants would be blessed and would be a blessing to all nations. The Bible has many stories of Abraham's child Isaac and Isaac's child Jacob.
But many years later, their descendants ended up in slavery to Pharaoh in Egypt. Pharaoh led a nation that was a model of oppression.
This is the way it is.
And the way it will always be.
Pharaoh is the biggest deal.
And slaves, slaves, slaves at the bottom of the heap.
Once again, God showed mercy and showed Moses how to lead God's chosen people out of Egypt. It took lots of convincing involving frogs and storms and blood.
Finally, the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, leaving Pharaoh's corrupt system behind.
Grr.
Let us sing to Yahweh.
God led them to a place where God would teach the people all over again about mercy, about living the manna way of life. God began by giving them a gift of rules to live by.
After all, they were accustomed to following Pharaoh's rules and didn't know how to be on their own. Time to go to school, wilderness school.
Today's lesson, living as free people.
Are we graded?
No, it's pass-fail.
They have to be taught how to live.
They're only human.
The people were now free, but they complained as they attended the wilderness school. They complained about the lack of food.
A new day in the wilderness.
What is it?
They complained there was no water.
I'm thirsty.
3 days and no water in sight.
God showed mercy on the Israelites and gave them water in the wilderness. God showed mercy and gave them manna, and then meat to eat, all they needed. God gave them the gift of the Sabbath. The people learned to share, to trust God.
40 years later, they graduated from wilderness school.
Yeah, we made it.
Thanks be to God.
The Israelites crossed to the promised land. They lived the manna way, but they saw their new neighbors had kings and asked God to provide them with one too.
We like our king.
God at first gave them judges, saying that I, God, am your king. Finally, God relented and selected Saul, David, and Solomon as their first 3 kings.
As time went on, there were good kings and bad kings. The Israelites began to act like their neighbors and began oppressing the poor again, no longer sharing as they did in the wilderness. The Israelites restored among themselves the system they had left behind in Egypt.
Order is good.
Order is very good.
The king is the biggest deal.
And the poor widows, the orphans, and the slaves at the bottom of the heap.
The Israelite kingdom was split into 2. God sent prophets like Isaiah to convince the people to return to the manna way, but they didn't listen. Oh no, back to wilderness school. This time God allowed the Babylonians to carry the people into captivity. God sent Jeremiah to remind the Israelites that they would return to their promised land if they learned their lesson well.
Land for sale, I'll take it.
Thank you. And now, if you don't mind, I have to run.
He's either crazy or he sees what others don't see.
To Babylon.
Get moving, everybody.
In Babylon they wept and longed to return home. God in his mercy sent prophets to tell them that they will indeed go home again. This next exodus will give them another chance to live the man away in their homeland.
Back home, they needed to rebuild their homes, and especially the temple. God wanted them to remember to show mercy to all people, not just their own community. They didn't understand that God's mercy is for all people. Stories about Ruth and Jonah were written to remind them of that.
But I'm a Moabite.
That's okay.
But soon more foreign kings began to oppress the Jewish people.
Stories like Daniel were written to give people hope. God always showed mercy to his chosen ones.
La-dee-da.
Daniel's God is the living God.
Finally, the Roman Empire reached into the homeland of the Israelites. That was yet another example of a government by the big deals to dominate the weak.
Greed and injustice returned, and oppression of the weak and the poor by the wealthy continued.
But again, God showed mercy. God decided that if the Jewish nation would not listen to the judges, nor the prophets, nor the kings, maybe they would listen to God himself as a human that walked among them.
My soul proclaims the greatness of Yahweh.
God sent John the Baptist to prepare the way for Jesus' ministry.
Repent and be baptized.
I question your sincerity.
God sent his Son as a messenger to show once more that the way of mercy, peace, and compassion instead of oppression of the weak and the poor. Jesus was the perfect messenger who had been long awaited. Jesus would finally set the people of the earth on the right path. Jesus proclaimed through parables and miracles the reign of God as place of abundant mercy and abundant manna for all.